Hello and welcome back, and thank you for joining me on this journey to connect with the energy of the tarot. And like any great journey, there needs to be a beginning, and of course with the tarot that starts with the Fool. So let's talk about the Fool here. I pulled 4 cards from decks I have around my house, starting here with the original Rider-Waite-Smith deck. This is the deck that started it all. This is the deck that most tarot creators, and not all, but most tarot creators use as their launching off point for connecting with that universal energy of the tarot. It contains that original recipe, so to speak. I'm going to go back to that cooking metaphor. You'll find I use cooking metaphors quite a bit here. The next deck I'm going to show in this video series here is the Del Toro deck, and this is a deck I picked up while in Salem, Massachusetts, and I just love the artwork here. But you can see, though, although similar in that we have a central character, this artist took a completely different spin to the energy. They added their own unique touch here. Next, we have the Crow Tarot. This is one of my decks, and because it's a crow themed deck, of course, the crow plays the center role here as the Fool. And for my Guardian of the Night, this is an animal-themed nocturnal deck. I chose the wolf for the Fool. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to unpack how each of these decks, although different in style, still possess that energy of the Fool. And we're going to start off here by taking a look at the symbolism. So let's start with the original here. This is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and as you can see, we have the central character. When you're doing a reading, this Fool character will most likely represent you. It may represent other people depending on the position, and especially if your intuition is calling you and saying, ooh, I know somebody who's really embodying this energy of the Fool, and we'll get more into the energy later. You might say, well, that could be this other person. But for most of the time, when you're asking a question, the Fool will represent you. You will see here that there's a number 0 on the card. This represents infinite possibilities. It's the beginning. It's just the start of a journey. It can also stand for a clean slate, or perhaps something that's ready to be filled. As you can see here on this Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the central character, the Fool, is a pretty happy-go-lucky kind of fellow. He's just wandering around. He's not really paying any attention. He's not concerned that he's about to fall off a cliff. Now, in the Del Toro deck, you can see here this Fool kind of just is wandering. He's staring aimlessly, perhaps looking blankly towards the future. On my Crow deck, I placed the crow on a log, traveling down a river, also staring off into the unknown. Now, of course, this Fool, or my Fool here with the crow, could fly away, but it doesn't. It has faith this river is going to provide a wonderful adventure. For the wolf here, you see the wolf has wandered out onto the cracking ice, completely not even concerned at all about the icy water below. So that brings us to risks, right? So let's talk about risks. The Fool does not pay much attention to them. I mean, the Fool just doesn't even acknowledge that there is a risk. As you see here, this Fool is depicted just about ready to step off a cliff, indicating that there is some risk involved with taking a leap of faith. It could also symbolize, depending on your reading, that a journey is in a transitional phase and the outcome is still uncertain. On the Del Toro deck here, you see that the figure isn't necessarily doing anything careless. However, I feel like this energy of the Fool comes through with just the position. It's blank stare. It's wandering through the unknown. For the crow, well, we all know crows and water do not mix. Crows do not like to swim. Well, there are exceptions to that, and that's a whole other discussion. But for this deck, this crow does not want to fall into the water because it could be very troublesome for it. And that's the risk for this bird, for this Fool, falling off the log and drowning. Of course, we have the ice here, which poses a significant risk to this poor wolf who is literally just looking for a meal. So On the rider-waite-smith deck, you see here, I'm going to add another level of symbolism, and we have that bag. That bag symbolizes what the Fool is taking with it on this journey. It's the experience, it's the wisdom, it's its past, it's its history. And that is what you'll find when you're reading this card, that is your history, your past. You know, it's a reminder that although you want to embrace the unknown, it's best not to forget what you've learned already. You'll see here in the Del Toro deck that yes, this Fool also is carrying the little white bag. My decks, however, do not use that symbolism. For the Crow Tarot, I use the tree to symbolize wisdom and rooted energy, and feeling grounded to your past. And we have the Howling Wolf here on the Guardian of the Night deck, and that does a double duty here for this card because it represents the connection to wisdom and your history, your loyalty to your family or your past, but also it represents protection. And that's where we go here with this next symbol, and that's the barking dog. The barking dog for the rider-waite-smith deck here represents loyalty and protection. It's a warning cry, perhaps, as well. That something, to be on the lookout. Something could happen. And although this little dog may see it, the Fool here is not paying attention. So the purpose of this little dog is a reminder that, use your wisdom as well. Pay attention. For the crow here, I chose to use the wind to represent this concept. It's the wind that carries the crow on its journey. It's the wind that can howl, also a warning if a storm is approaching. At the bottom, if you look very closely here, at the very bottom of the Del Toro deck, there is a small praying mantis. This may represent the dog as well. You may see here, that each of these decks take their own approach to that howling or that warning sign. While at the same time, we're all representing the similar energy with that symbolism. The white rose, oops, let me pull this here. The white rose for the rider-waite-smith deck here represents purity and innocence, right? There's that innocence of spirit with this childlike Fool. It also can indicate a fresh start or a new beginning. I chose the white rabbit for my Guardian of the Night deck to represent that. And you'll see in my decks, white rabbits are all over my decks to represent that fertility and new beginnings. For the Crow Tarot, I chose the lotus. It's a universal sign of purity and innocence as well. On the rider-waite-smith deck, going back to the original here, you'll see mountains. And mountains represent challenges and obstacles that you will need to face along this new journey of yours, right? Nothing is ever perfectly smooth. You will encounter some form of an obstacle. And that could also, keep in mind here, signify a spiritual growth or ascension. You'll find mountains as well, of course, on my Fool card here. And although I didn't use mountains for the Crow Tarot, I did use a fern leaf to signify that spiritual growth. On the Del Toro deck, there are no mountains. Maybe that's a mountain here. But what I found on this deck was that the central figure's back almost seemed mountainous to me. So again, we all interpret the cards a little bit differently, but the energy is still there. It's still the Fool energy. The sun shining in the background of the rider-waite-smith deck, it's light, it's to give you that uplifting feeling. And you can see that the Del Toro deck also used that light color to symbolize enlightenment and vitality. Perhaps divine energy is guiding you along your journey. For the Guardian of the Night, I chose the Northern Lights to represent this energy. And of course, here with the Crow Tarot, I chose the water, this reflective water. Okay, so now that we have the basic symbolism covered, let's connect to that energy of the Fool. Can you think of a time that you took a risk? when you had this leap of faith, when you went forward with something that others warned you about. If they said, no, don't do it, stop, you're going to get hurt, or it's going to lead down a path that you're not going to like, but you knew deep in your heart, right? You knew like, this is what I'm supposed to do, that you knew that everything was going to be okay. Now think about a time that you experienced a spiritual growth. Can you draw a connection between these two experiences? In this section, we are going to examine some strategies that will have us feeling deeply connected to the full energy, because that's what we want to do here. We want to feel that connection. The purpose is to imprint that energy on your deck so it will be there the next time you use it. So let's get started here. Let's think about a time when you were excited about traveling to a new place. Can you recall how that felt? Can you feel the butterflies perhaps in your belly? Or maybe you started a new hobby or tackled a project. And if you were initially hesitant to do those things, what moved you forward? So this would be a great time to grab that notebook and start jotting down ideas or insights that come to mind. Because you know what? The Fool is a naturally curious, always eager to learn character. Do you recall a time when you were curious and it took you in a whole new direction? Maybe it took you far afield from where you were when you started. You know, the goal is to gather within, right? We want to gather that energy. We want to pull it towards us and bring it out. That is the whole purpose here. So, if you're finding it difficult to connect with your full energy, a great way to get connected, to conjure that Fool up, is to be in the moment. The Fool lives in the moment. And there are wonderful strategies for doing that, such as meditation and practicing mindfulness. The Fool leaps us into the unknown. The Fool asks that we trust the universe with a knowing that the universe is there to guide and support us. So can you recall a time when you took that leap of faith and you jumped, feet first, and you weren't paying attention to any of the consequences, and everything worked out just fine? Everything was just like brilliant. It was just like it was meant to be. It's that fearlessness that the Fool has that others might look at and say, well, the Fool is being foolish or the Fool is being careless, but it's that fearlessness that takes this Fool on new adventures. So can you think about some of the fears perhaps that have held you back from taking new adventures? What do you need to do to release those fears? The Fool is open because it starts our journey here with the Tarot, right? So it's open to all of the possibilities that the world offers. And a fun way to connect with this energy is, and this is something that I think they do like in improv classes, is start with a statement such as, I want to go on vacation. Now add to that statement, I want to go on vacation someplace sunny. Add again, I want to go on a vacation that is not just sunny, but where I can swim in the ocean, and keep going and see how far you can take the possibilities. You'll find it's almost endless. Now, finally, to connect with the Fool energy, it's so important to embrace that inner child. Maybe that inner child that's been kind of stifled or pushed down for too long. The Fool embodies a playful spirit and is lighthearted and sees the world as a place of wonder to be explored. So the best way to get that inner child out is to do something fun. Engage in play. Get out there and play a game. Just engage with others in a sport or doing something that is not necessarily very adult-like, draw on the sidewalk with chalk. That's a wonderful way to capture that inner child. Be creative. Whatever you do, you want that inner child to feel like they had a lovely afternoon or morning out, or, whatever it is that your inner child loves to do. Even just playing video games is a great way to release that inner child for those of us who grew up in the 80s with our Atari sets. whatever you can do to recapture that youthfulness, do it. Road trips are a great way of doing that. Going to the beach, spending an hour examining the shells and picking up rocks. Your inner child will delight in that. So that is the key here, is to get that inner child out, connect with that full energy. And I'll see you back here when we talk about the magician. Peace. Peace.